A secret meeting about you ended, and someone walked out in tears. Archangel Michael says your name was spoken in a room without windows, where the table reflected more secrets than any mirror could hold. 4 chairs were occupied, but 5 shadows leaned over the polished surface because one unseen presence would not leave you undefended. A decision trailed the air like cold breath on glass, and when the door opened at last, a single figure stepped into the corridor, cheeks wet, carrying the weight of a choice that would change you forever. They met at a time chosen to make truth drowsy and courage late. The clock had just crossed midnight, that narrow bridge where yesterday limps and tomorrow hasn't yet learned to run. On the table sat a black leather folder, a brass key on a red string, and a phone face down with a cracked corner like a tiny lightning bolt. The woman in the gray scarf spoke first, voice steady the way a lake looks calm even when something enormous stirs beneath. She had a list printed on thick paper, and every bullet point pulsed like a heartbeat turned into ink. The man with the tired jaw said your name as if it were a password, testing doors only he could see. They weighed your history and handled your future with gloved hands, afraid of fingerprints that could betray them later. Every sentence became a stone added to a wall they wanted to build between you and the next thing you are meant to reach. 2 of them thought the wall would protect their comfort, and the other 2 feared that without it, your light would make them look smaller than they wanted to feel. 1 chair remained silent for so long that the silence developed its own gravity. In that silence, a small courage woke up, yawned, and stood taller than any of their plans. That silence belonged to the person who would walk out in tears, the one whose heart kept its own minutes and refused to be late. They talked about your recent days with the softness people reserve for fragile things they plan to break later. They made a timetable for your options as if they owned the seasons. A calendar lay open to a month marked in red, and your initials were written beside a date that was not a celebration but a strategy. Someone slid a blue pen across the table and it wouldn't write at first. They shook it and scribbled a first line that looked restless and raw, like the beginning of a storm. What they wrote required your silence to succeed, and your silence is the one resource you have decided to ration. A small black recorder blinked from under a folder, its red light a single ember in a cold fireplace. The woman in the gray scarf noticed it and covered it with her palm like a mother protecting a secret she no longer believed in. The recorder kept listening anyway because truth never learns how to stop. They spoke about your voice and how it gathers people who feel unseen until they hear you and remember themselves. They spoke about your patience and how it threatens all the quick and careless shortcuts. They spoke about your resilience the way thieves talk about locks they don't want to face at night. In that room, fear wore expensive shoes and certainty wore a cheap smile. Every plan had a hinge, and every hinge creaked when your name leaned against it. The person with the rough knuckles tapped a rhythm on the table that used to mean victory and now meant doubt. What they wanted was simple on paper and impossible in real life. They wanted you quiet where you have always been a bell. They wanted you still where your calling is a river that refuses to memorize one path. The one who would cry later asked a question that split the night into before and after. It was not loud, but it had weight, the way a lamp seems heavier when you carry it toward a darker room. What happens to us if we are wrong about them? They asked, and the word wrong shook as if it knew the cost of being true. The gray-scarfed woman rearranged her pages as if order could replace conscience. She said that doubt is a luxury, and tonight they were buying outcomes. She said outcomes pay bills and doubts write poetry, and no one leaves with a poem that can keep the lights on. The tired-jawed man mentioned a deadline and a call that cannot be missed. He believed in clocks because clocks never ask who deserves to arrive first. He believed in doors because doors can be closed without apology. There was mention of a message drafted in your name, a statement that would turn your bravery into noise. There was mention of a meeting scheduled without you, a choice signed by hands that never learned to hold you well. There was mention of a transfer, a leverage, an opportunity redirected like a river forced to learn a new mouth. A phone buzzed against the table like a trapped fly. No one picked it up, but everyone listened to the vibration confess the urgency that words were trained to hide. The person who would cry looked at the phone and realized the room had already decided what the outside world would hear. You were not invited, but your future was, and futures are bad at sitting quietly. Every time your name appeared on the page, a small brightness pressed against the ink. Even their pens felt the tremor of a story that refused to be written by strangers. The recorder kept its little red eye open, the patient pupil of consequence. It heard the moment when "we think" turned into "we will," and it marked the exact second when caution was traded for convenience. Some trades are profitable and still ruin the one who signs. The tearful one, who had stayed mostly still, lifted their gaze as if expecting a storm to show up inside. In that gaze lived a memory of you helping them once in a hallway full of closed doors. You had said their names so that it would not feel alone, and tonight that memory became a compass. They pushed their chair back, and the sound made the room look at itself. They said something quiet enough to be kind and strong enough to be heard. "We cannot do this to them," they said, and the word "cannot" stepped between you and the sharp edge of the plan. The gray scarf argued about policy and precedent. The tired jaw argued about time and cost. The third voice argued about optics, as if a clean window could fix the view under a storm. But the one who would cry had already made a promise to the part of themselves that remembers mornings. That part does not count wins. It watches sunrises and calls it even. They gathered the courage like a coat left on the back of a chair and stood up. A key on a red string slid into their palm, almost by accident, like destiny pretending to be clumsy. They looked at it and knew it belonged in your hand. Keys are small, but every threshold is built to respect them. They left the room before the vote, and sometimes leaving is the bravest way to stay. The corridor smelled like lemon cleaner and endings. Lights hummed overhead, making the night feel domesticated and false. They walked until their steps found a bench near a vending machine that lit their face like an apology. There, in the middle of modern loneliness, they let their eyes carry the water they had saved from drowning in that room. They let the tears fall because not all floods destroy, some baptize the courage they intend to keep. Your name arrived in their throat and would not go away. They reached into their coat and pulled out a folded page that didn't belong to them. They didn't steal it, they rescued it from a story that would have harmed you. The page smelled faintly of toner and risk. At the bottom was a date that pretended to be a finish line and was actually a trapdoor. Beside the date were initials you would recognize in your sleep. They wondered how to reach you fast enough without alerting the ones who loved their plans more than they loved truth. The vending machine flickered, an electric wink from a world that sometimes conspires toward good. They took it as a sign that small lights can still guide big ships. By the time dawn found their face, your phone was already blinking with an unknown message. It contained no greetings, just coordinates disguised as ordinary lines. Behind the library, side door, second step, look under, it said, the word skinny with urgency. At the library, the morning smelled like paper trying to remember forests. Dew made everything look forgiven. You moved quietly past the side door and counted steps like blessings disguised as numbers. Under the second step, your hand met the smooth coolness of a tin box that had been waiting. Inside were two things: the page with your initials stained by someone else's insistence, and the brass key with the red string. It felt like a heartbeat when you lifted it, the metal storing a warmth that did not belong to the weather. A note in tiny handwriting waited beside the key, its letters carrying the slight shake of someone who had argued with fear and won enough to write. The room was wrong, it said. Not all of us were. You read the page and felt the plan they made like a net meant to catch your next step. Every paragraph was a prediction trying to overtake you, but the key interrupted those sentences with its small honest weight. When you turned the key in the lock it had chosen, a drawer long closed slid open with the sigh of an old friend. Inside was a list of names who had said yes to you before the room decided to rehearse their no. Some names surprised you with their quiet loyalty. Others confirmed what your intuition had already whispered through closed doors. There was also a voice memo on a tiny drive, a confession captured in that room where truth had been treated like a guest who arrived without flowers. You pressed play and heard chair legs scrape, papers shift, and then the sentence. That mattered most. We will make them small again, someone said, and the cruelty. In that softness taught you everything you needed to know. You sat with the evidence and did not hurry past the ache. Not all speed is strength. Sometimes stamina is the better ancestor of victory. You breathed until your ribs remembered they were instruments, not cages. The day carried you to a place where you could decide without their noise. In that place, your past waited without shame and your future stood without impatience. Between them, you felt exactly where you belong, here, now, awake. You made 3 calls that mattered and ignored 7 that didn't. You said 2 sentences that will echo for a year, I know, and not anymore. You opened one door you were not supposed to know about and stepped through with the grace of someone who has stopped asking permission to be themselves. Word spread that your silence had ended its shift. The room without windows learned that even fortresses have vents where air gets in. The gray scarf scrolled through messages with a thumb that would not stop trembling. The tired jaw practiced new sentences in a mirror, each one an apology rehearsed like a commercial. They thought about calling you and decided to send a message instead, where courage can be edited before delivery. The third voice looked at a calendar and realized that dates are the least loyal witnesses. Meanwhile, the one who walked out in tears watched the daylight tidy the city. They wondered whether they had done enough or too much, whether truth would protect them from the heat of consequence. Then their phone lit up with your name, and the world grew a spare room for relief. You did not say thank you because thank you was too small for the hallway they built between you and harm. You said, I saw what you did, and I will take it from here. Their shoulders lowered as if someone had returned gravity to its proper place. Your next steps were simple and therefore exacting. You told the truth in words that liked being looked at. You preferred facts over fireworks and clarity over volume, and the world heard the difference. People who had been waiting for someone to go first found their feet again. They adjusted their backs and remembered how spine feels. The news traveled like water carrying seeds, and where it went, small green insistences began to rise. You did not attack the room, you outgrew it. You did not break the table, you built another and set more chairs. You did not hoard the key. You made more copies and returned the original to the red string because symbols deserve their homes. At night, you placed the tin box on a shelf where morning light would find it. The box was not a trophy. It was a reminder that some rescues are quiet and some heroes walk out in tears. You chose to protect the person who chose to protect you, because alliances made in truth are not candlelit, they are sunrise-lit. Days layered themselves into a sequence you could trust. The plan against you lost the oxygen of secrecy and faded like a rumor that ran out of breath. Your voice kept its tone, warm at the edges, steady in the center, and people leaned in because steadiness is rare and therefore magnetic. The gray scarf, to her credit, came to see you with a face that had finally learned humility. She brought no pages, only a single sentence, I forgot who you are. You nodded, because identity is not a performance. It is a home you keep unlocking. The tired jaw surprised you, too, with a letter that did not beg but did bend. It offered information you could have used yesterday, and you accepted it for the usefulness it had today. Reconstruction is not as dramatic as demolition, but it lasts longer. The third voice disappeared from the corridor of your life like a picture taken down from a wall no one misses. Some exits are mercies disguised as losses. You kept the frame empty for a while to remember what you are not required to hold. You met the tearful one again, not in a corridor this time but under open sky. Their eyes were clear in the way that happens after a storm chooses its next ocean. You talked like people who know that future is a plural word when handled correctly. You asked what had made them speak up in that room where speaking was expensive. They told you a small story about a day you had forgotten, when you held an elevator door with your foot because their hands were full. It is a dangerous thing, they said, to be helped by someone who doesn't keep score. You smiled without performance, and the day did the same. Somewhere behind you, a door closed gently. Somewhere ahead, another door discovered it had always been open, it only needed a hand brave enough to push. The work of your life did not pause for this drama. It absorbed it like a river takes in rain. You returned to your purpose the way a musician returns to a melody that was patient enough to wait. You learned that even betrayal, handled well, can become a better instrument in your orchestra of becoming. You chose a quieter room and set your new table with intention. On it you placed a candle, not because you were in the dark but because you honor the tradition of small light. You placed a pen that works and a paper that invites and a chair for anyone who arrives with truth. Sometimes, when shadows lengthen, you still hear the scrape of that other chair and the rustle of pages that mistook themselves for power. When that echo comes, you let it pass through you like wind through an open window. You have nothing to trap and nothing to chase. The night that once tried to hide a decision now stands near your window like an old neighbor who has learned to be kind. You do not fear it. You nod to it like you would to a sky that once thundered and now only keeps the stars in order. You are not smaller for what happened. You are as you ever were, but clarified. Your steps are no longer guesses. They are agreements with the future that has always been waiting at the end of the hall. You tuck the key with the red string into a drawer where you keep letters from people who tell the truth. You promise yourself to answer them first, always. If another room gathers and whispers your name, they will find that the echo does not behave the way it used to. The echo will walk out into daylight and tell you everything. There will always be someone whose eyes water when they realize the price of kindness, and there will always be you, ready to turn tears into a map. You are not a rumor to be managed. You are a road to be followed. You are not the subject of their minutes. You are the author of your days. The door that led to harm has learned a new discipline. It cannot open without your consent. Tonight, as you set your phone down face up, you give the light permission to be honest. Your windows do not need curtains to feel safe. Your name is no longer an agenda item. It is a sentence that ends with a period full of peace. The person who walked out in tears sleeps with the relief that follows right action. They dream of benches that are not near vending machines and hallways that smell like courage instead of cleaner. In the morning, they will text you a photo of the sunrise and you will reply with one word that sounds like a warm room, here. Because you are here. Because the world is better when you are not kept behind glass. Because no meeting can schedule the end of your becoming. Because the key is small and the future is not. Because the door remembered your hand the moment it felt it. Because you did not win by uproar but by returning to your rightful size. Archangel Michael says the worst they could do was try to vote on your worth when worth is not subject to meetings. He says your name out loud where wind carries it gently and returns it to you brighter. He says the person who cried is not your weakness but proof that goodness still interrupts comfortable plans. He says to keep the tin box not as evidence but as origin, a starting point you can revisit when victory forgets how it began. He says to keep walking with the posture of someone who knows where the sky is. He says to keep your table ready for truth and your door half open for the ones who bring it. And he says this story is not a cautionary tale, it is an introduction. It is the sound of the first real page turning after too many drafts written by other hands. It is the agreement between your breath and your horizon that they will keep each other honest. So you go on. You carry quiet like a lantern, glowing enough to guide, soft enough to soothe. You carry courage like a coat you no longer take off when you come inside. When the city sleeps and the stars arrange themselves into a sentence you can almost read, you stand at your window and nod. You are not remembering the room, you are remembering the moment you stopped needing it. The night nods back because even darkness respects a door that knows who it belongs to. This is how you continue, with a voice that does not hurry, with steps that do not ask permission, with a key that jingles softly like a promise that kept itself. The meeting is over. Your life is not. And if someday the hallway fills again with people carrying pages and lips, You will meet them with a gaze they cannot misinterpret. You will meet them with evidence that lives in the way you stand. You will meet them with an invitation that feels like a sunrise. Come sit at a table where truth can breathe. There will be no recorder hidden under your folder because you will speak to be understood, not to trap. There will be no vote on your worth because worth is here, present, not up for motion. At the end of that day, your hands will be empty of defense and full of work. You will sleep without unfinished arguments tugging at your pillow. The morning will place a clean glass of light on your sill and you will drink. You will think of the person who cried and add their name to the page titled, "People Who Chose Me When It Wasn't Easy." The page will never be crowded because courage is rare, and that is all right. Rarity doesn't mean small, it means precious. Your road will open like a book that trusts you. Your steps will learn the punctuation of joy, commas for breath, dashes for leaps, periods that rest without fear. Your story will be written in present tense because you live in it, not after it. The brass key will dull a little and then shine again where your fingers touch it. The red string will fray at the edges like a good conversation that never says goodbye. The tin box will collect small dents from being carried to places where memory wants company. Archangel Michael says your name again, this time with the warmth of a door closing gently behind you, keeping out only what does not belong. He says the room lost something when you refuse to be smaller. He says you gained something you can never lose, the habit of belonging to yourself. Now breathe. The meeting is a museum, you are a river. Let the past keep its exhibits while you keep moving toward the sea that is yours. Let the benches of the world catch people who need to cry for courage, and may you always be the kind of person whose story gives them a reason to stand up afterward. Let the corridors learn new echoes, ones where your name is followed by verbs that build. Let the keys in your life keep finding locks that deserve them. And when night rises like a curtain, may your stage be set with truth, mercy, and a seat for every necessary ally. The lights will warm, the audience will hush, and you will step forward, uncoached and ready. The first line is yours and has always been, I am here. If you wish to express your support further, you have the option to give super thanks, with contributions of up to $20.